Hello, 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 everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Salvador Munoz, and I am the Director of Public Programs here at Poster House, which is, of course, the first and only museum in the United States dedicated to the art and history of the poster. Usually people clap at that part. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If you are here for tonight's program, we ask that you take a seat because we're going to get started shortly. If you are not here for today's program and you're just here to enjoy the exhibits, we ask that you keep your voices to a minimum so that the rest of us can hear this important lecture. I do a lot of these introductions. We have at least one event a week, most of the time 3 events a week. This is my 4th event of the week, but I think this is the first time that I have been nervous. And I am nervous because there is a lot of excellence in this room right now. There is a lot of and I want to make sure that we have enough time to absorb all of that excellence. So I'm going to keep my introduction very, very short because you're not here to see me talk tonight. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about how this program came together before we get into it, right? So I reached out to my friend Essie at the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop. And I said, hey, do you want to do some collaborative programs? We have this great exhibition on view right now called Lester Beall and a New American Identity that explores Lester Beall's WPA posters. It's the first time that all 6 WPA posters have been presented at once. And Essie said, well, you know who was a WPA printer? Robert Blackburn. And I said, I did not know that. And she said, and do you know who the foremost expert is on Robert Blackburn and his WPA prints? And I said, no, who? And she said, Dr. Leslie King Hammond. You have to reach out to Dr. Leslie King Hammond. So I said, okay. And I sent a cold email. And Leslie said, who are you? Why are you contacting me? And I said, please, 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 won't you please grace me with just a 10-minute call so that I can pitch you my idea? And she listened to me ramble, just like I am now, and she said yes. And I am incredibly grateful for that. But because this is presented in partnership with the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, I would very much appreciate it if you would join me in giving a warm welcome to Artistic Director Jasmine, whose last name I just learned and totally blanked out now, but please give a warm welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Salvador. I don't know your last name, so it's okay.
There we go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again, Poster House, for inviting us to talk a bit about Robert Blackburn ahead of Dr. Leslie King Hammond's talk, which I'm very, very looking forward to. I am the artistic director and one of the master printers of the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop. Yeah, the history of American printmaking cannot be told without recognizing the contributions of this man, Robert Blackburn, and his printmaking workshop. Do we go this way? Okay. Robert Hamilton Blackburn was born in 1920 to Jamaican immigrant parents in Summit, New Jersey. His family moved to Harlem in 1927, a pivotal moment that would shape his life and career. His artistic journey began at the age of 14, attending community art centers such as the Harlem Arts Workshop, the Uptown Arts Laboratory, and the 306 Studio or Salon started by Charles Alston. These programs brought him into contact with an extraordinary network of African-American artists, including Ronald Joseph, Ernest Critchlow, and Romare Bearden, who all would become later known as luminaries of their time. During this time, artists often created these community teaching centers without pay, driven by their personal commitment to nurture young artists in Harlem. What do we got here? Oh, I love this picture. The The WPA formalized these efforts for community engagement and education by expanding access to technical expertise and equipment. One notable site was the Uptown Arts Laboratory founded by Augustus Savage. And Augustus Savage's Uptown Arts Laboratory then evolved into the Harlem Community Arts Center due to WPA funding in 1937. The Harlem Community Arts Center, located at 290 Lenox Avenue, became a hub for creative and educational opportunities previously unavailable to the Black community, offering classes in painting and sculpture, murals, children's art, and printmaking. Reflecting on his experience at the Uptown Arts Laboratory or the Harlem Community Arts Center, Blackburn recalled the WPA made all the artists equal so that Black artists could get a chance to work. I cannot tell you the impact of coming down to Augustus Savage's place and sitting in a room with Norman Lewis, Jake Lawrence, and Sminky, nickname for Charles Alston. The Harlem Community Arts Center was the first to provide accessible fine art print graphic facilities to the Harlem's Black community. It was here Blackburn first learned lithography under the guidance of Reba Helfand. His exposure to the ideals of the Harlem Renaissance and WPA profoundly shaped his philosophy and approach to art. These programs later inspired his model for creating an accessible printmaking workshop. In 1940, Robert Blackburn earned a scholarship to the Art Students League, further solidifying his artistic foundation. After World War II, the funding for these community art centers waned, racial segregation persisted. Blackburn decided to open his own space. In late winter 1947, he established the Printmaking Workshop on 17th Street in New York City. This was just 5 years after the Harlem Community Arts Center had closed in 1942. His vision was to create an environment centered on collaboration, experimentation, inclusivity, a reflection of his formative experiences in Harlem. While running and expanding his workshop, Blackburn taught widely at institutions such as the Cooper Union, SVA, Maryland Institute College of Art, Columbia University, and he became a highly respected color lithographer and served as the first master printer of ULAE, United Limited Art Editions. It's a printmaking studio out in Long Island, where he produced the first 79 editions for artists such as Helen Frankenthaler, Grace Hardigan, Jasper Johns, and Robert Rauschenberg. Over 5 decades, Blackburn received numerous accolades, including 5 honorary doctorates, recognitions from institutions like the Cooper Union and NYU, where he also taught. He won the MacArthur Genius Grant in 1992. His workshop became a magnet for international artists, resulting in a richly diverse graphic output unparalleled in the United States. In 2002, due to declining health, Blackburn closed the printmaking workshop and it reopened in 2005 at the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts as the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, where it lives today. And today, continuing its mission to provide affordable access to traditional and experimental printmaking techniques. So today, at the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, is the longest and largest running community print shop in the United States, serving as a space of experimentation of countless notable and underrecognized artists of the 20th century. The workshop continues to provide professional quality facilities to artists and printmakers of any skill level. Yes. Anyone at any skill level can become a member. We have a robust education program that offers internships, classes, and all printmaking techniques. So here's, I paired these with some photos we found in the archive of the print shop then and now. Print shop then, print shop now. Off-site workshops as well. We offer contract printing services and continue to collaborate with contemporary artists. Including internships. Tell your young students. We offer various fellowship programs. So we have the Combination Stiff Fellowship Program for artists who have very little to no printmaking experience, to have an intensive printmaking education. And we have a Legacy Fellowship where we offer work in the studio as well as auditioning for artists who have worked with Bob in the past and or were part of the workshop in the past. We also house the Print Archive, which houses thousands of work created at the workshop from the 1940s to the present. Blackburn was known for his generosity and encouragement of experimentation, welcoming printmakers and non-printmakers alike. As a result, the archive represents one of the most diverse records of printmaking in the US, reflecting the various communities that Robert Blackburn has engaged with. In 2006, the Library of Congress acquired a core collection of 2,044 works by 1,031 artists, including the largest selection of Bob Blackburn's own work. An estimated 10,000 prints still remain on site at the print shop now, with new works added regularly. EFA RBPMW is committed to preserving his legacy and plans to place additional collections in New York institutions to ensure Blackburn's impact continues to inspire future generations. And in an effort to remain committed to the legacy of Robert Blackburn, we opened the Blackburn Study Center. It is dedicated to advancing research and scholarship of our founder, Robert Blackburn, and the Printmaking Workshop. Our mission is to uncover and highlight the many contributions Printmaking Workshop has had in art history of the 20th century, the research and free public programming, including exhibitions and organizations with other organizations. We often work with the New York Public Library, which is great. Recently, we received funding from the Hauser & Wirth Institute. We completed a video-based oral history entitled The Only Thing That Lasts, an oral history of Robert Blackburn's printmaking workshop to document the founder, Robert Blackburn, and the history of the print shop. And finally, yes, I would like to thank you all again, but I would also like to invite you to our next event, celebrating the centennial of Krishna Reddy, in partnership with the Print Center New York. Krishna Reddy and Bob had a long relationship, good friends, great printmaker. So we're having a on-site event in March, so please go to our website and see that. Join our mailing list, and also just please feel free to drop by the print shop anytime. Thank you. So, yeah. I was like,
And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Leslie King Hammond.
Am I supposed to say more about you? We were wondering, thank you so much. I cannot tell you what a joy it is to be here and to be invited to such an important moment in history. When I got the call, trust me, I was suspect. I had never heard of this organization before, much less the fact that when I originally did this research in 1988, 1989, and it was, and it was to be exhibited at the Lehman Gallery of Art at Lehman College, I had no idea what was going on, except for the fact that I have been intensely involved in the past few years with co-curating an exhibition on Witnessing Humanity, John Wilson, which will open at the MFA Boston in February the 9th, and then travel to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So there I was already in the mix with printmaking, and then this opportunity pops up, and I go, oh my God, this is very bizarre. So anyway, I am indebted to the Robert Blackburn workshop for inviting me, because I did know Robert Blackburn. I am Professor Emerita from Maryland Institute College of Art, and Bob Blackburn in the 90s was a regular visiting artist at the campus, working in the studios with the students and the artists. And Grace Hardigan was one of the directors of the program that I have managed or administrated. Uh, Grace Hardigan was head of the Hofburger School of Painting, so she and Bob were good friends. And over the years, they had this relationship that I was privy to. So my career has been entirely blessed. So I'm notorious for going off script. I do have notes. All right, I did have a plan. So you should know just a little bit about me. I'm born, raised, educated, New York City, public schools, all the way through Queens College. All right. I am the product of an Afro-Caribbean family who was part of the Great Migration and the Great Depression, 1929. So as I talk, I will probably be dropping tidbits of things that I remember from what they were telling me at the time when I was doing this research, because they didn't really understand what I was doing. They sort of thought I was, again, slightly off the radar, in that being in the art field would not get me anywhere. And I'm sure you all are up there looking, saying, oh my God, she did what she said she was gonna do. Not knowing how I was going to do it, but knowing that I had to follow this passion. I just had this inner voice, and I said, no, I'm gonna do this regardless, okay? No offense, there are people down there making noise and getting in the way. Can we, thank you. No, because these folks here want to, and then we're live streaming, Okay, now, back to the point at hand. I also thought that at yeah, I got the remote, okay. In fact, this is my tag along here who's watching me. Huh? Oh, thank you. That helps enormously. Thank you. Now, just to get everybody on the same page, because as I'm coming down on the train and people are talking and they're saying, well, what are you doing? And she's telling all my business, Lowry Stokes Sims, all right, about what I'm getting ready to do here tonight, all right? And this gentleman says, oh, that's fascinating, but nobody knows anything about the WPA. I said, you're right. So I have been just pulling together a few facts to get us centered so that you understand what was going on. It is a project that occurred at the time of the Great Migration, in the midst of the Great Migration, and as a result of the impact of this incredible depression that hit the Great Depression in 1929. I remember growing up, my father, who had migrated from Barbados to the United States, would talk about growing up as a child in Harlem, watching people, men, primarily men, standing on the street corner selling pencils and apples to make money, and then turning around and seeing a man jump off a building committing suicide because of the devastation of what was happening nationally. Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the time, realizing that the entire nation was in a desperate state, decided to establish a program, originally called the New Deal, then later on renamed in 1939, the Works Projects Administration. It constituted at that time $4.5 billion, which translates in today's money as $88.4 billion, so that you understand the magnitude of it. It was an unprecedented time in history, and I have to say clearly that all individuals who had a quote-unquote skilled labor were able to acquire some title of employment, but that artists were fortunate only to be listed on the employment records as artists, and so they were given jobs, and not because there was any great faith in what artists were doing. The program was initially designed to give attention to families and individuals seeking needs to support their families and themselves. Ironically, the government, in terms of what you were supposed to do when you got on the project, especially where the federal art project was concerned, where the artists function, all they said was, oh, just do something about America. All right? So doing this lecture was like, oh, this is great. Because since I did the initial research, finally, so many organizations have gotten back to getting into the archives and the records. And I'll explain that as I go through and I show the different areas. They had established over about 100 art centers in the United States. Minimally, African Americans were part of it. They were funded only at the tune of about 15%, which equated in that day's population around 400,000 individuals. Yet and still, these individuals who worked on enormous projects all over the place, building schools, building rodeo grounds, building fairgrounds, building parks, renovating buildings, building schools. I went to a high school that was built under the WPA template, the plan. The school was designed for 2,500 students. At the time I went to high school, 4,500 students had moved into the borough of Queens, and we were on triple session, starting at 7 a.m. in the morning, running all the way through till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes. And no, I thought it's really important to hear the range of magnitude. It was the first time that Black and white artists got to mingle, because basically segregation was the rule. And especially if you were located in the South, segregation was rigidly enforced. There was very little opportunity for artists of color, African American descendants, to gain any latitude. In order to be employed on the WPA, you had to be between the ages of 18 to 65. Although in some areas you could have been enrolled at the age of 16. So Jacob Lawrence, who we all know so well, who was part of the Harlem Art Center, Recreation Art Center, was worked with Charles Abinson, not Charles Abinson, excuse me, Charles Alston and Augusta Savage. Augusta Savage remembered when Jacob Lawrence became 18 and took him down to the office to get him registered. So he was part of the Easel Project. So you won't see any Jacob Lawrence tonight, but you will see many others that you know and more that you don't. The pay was between $19 a month to $94 a month, depending on the region in which you lived in the United States, the degree of urbanization of that locale, and your skill. For individuals who making next to nothing, and as my father had said, on street corners, trying to sell pencils and apples or jumping off of buildings, this was an enormous boon to help people survive. And to that end, the government was doing amazing work. Now, the art centers did not only just include visual arts, they had a writers section, they had music, they had theater, they had historical records, they had library services, and all of these initiatives were underwritten by the government. However, let me just say this before I get to the last part of these notes and before I go into the pictures, that many of the artists that we know today who have become, art stars and celebrities, like Raphael Sawyer and Stuart Davis, Philip Evergood, Ashel Gorky, Alice Neal, Jackson Pollock, Joseph Stella, Mark Toby, and then I came across a blip. How did Diego Rivera get on the list? Was he a special consultant to the murals at the time? But this is what the records reveal. And there still has yet to be significant research to be done in this area to understand what I call a lot of the fault lines in American art history that have not been addressed, and also how the formation of modernism evolved with these artists that we're talking about. Now, some other little ditties that you need to understand that even my esteemed colleague, the Dr. Lowry Stokes Sims, didn't know was that WPA dollars also went to creating and instilling and moving and setting up Japanese internment camps. All right? They were also criticized, the WPA, for their lack of attention and support for disabled persons. And in the state of New York, we know that they finally revised their statutes, and at least 1,500 people are noted to have attended, been able to gain access to jobs on the WPA. Excuse me, I'm just going to dump these on the floor. Now, the works that I'm going to show you that were available in terms of the resources available within these workshops, which were largely experimental and for many of the artists very new in terms of the materials, led to etchings, which are old, intaglio, old, lino cuts, which were very new because linoleum was a new advancement of the Industrial Revolution at the time. And so you could get these tiles, 12 by 12, and the artists, and they were cheap at the time, and you could just run crazy with them. Litho, which is of course an old one, silkscreen, more new, and then woodblock, old. We go back to Albert Dürer and those artists, okay? So that's for materials, done. Get over there. Here we go. Now, I call this talk Bearing Witness, Black Printmakers Calling Out America, because many of the images that we are going to see talk about America in such a myriad of ways and styles and modalities and techniques. And each and every artist, because they were working independently, had their own vision as they were experiencing the processes that they were working with, the materials that were accessible to them, and the politics at the time. The Harlem Community Arts Center was one of the most vibrant, and we know that the Harlem artist community serviced approximately 8,000 people during the duration of its tenure. It was run primarily Augusta Savage in the beginning, and then Charles Alston became very important. And this is where Jacob Lawrence had received a lot of his training. So of course, who were some of those students? Bob Blackburn. This is Refugees. This is When His Girl in Red. Refugees is about 1938, and the Girl in the Dress is around 1950, just after the workshop closes. However, this is the place where I am sure Jacob Lawrence also had experiments, because I have photographs in the book Over the Line, his catalog raisonné, which show him doing potato prints, all right? So even though I named all these other things, they were using potato prints because they were resourceful, and they were also teaching children, and this was easy, accessible materials. This is Ronald Joseph, and this is a portrait of Robert Blackburn. I mean, when I was doing this research, I can only tell you, I don't even remember, and I probably was kind of a little bizarre at the time too, and I was like, you want me to do what? Because I had been doing a lot of work on Jacob Lawrence, so they figured that, WPA, Jacob Lawrence, that I could do the extension. And then once I got into it, I got a faculty grant from Maryland Institute College of Art to do the rest of the research. Now, this is William Henry Johnson, who became my dissertation topic at Johns Hopkins. Oh my God, could I talk a long time on this? William Henry Johnson had been working in New York City, having come from Florence, South Carolina. Then he went to the National Academy of Design here in New York, had a stellar, brilliant career, winning prizes every year. And then when the final year came to get the big travel prize, they just thought this colored boy was not worthy enough. So his fellow instructors, and with Charles Hawthorne, raised the equivalent of the money, gave him the money and told him, you need to go to Europe because they're not ready for a Negro artist in the United States. Off he went to Europe, got a studio that Whistler had, followed Soutine and all of those avant-garde artists at the time, came back 1929, went down south to see his family in South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina, tiny little town in South Carolina. And while he was there, he was painting on the street corner, the house of ill repute, and the town fathers took exception to a black man painting and arrested him in the painting and put them both in jail. So when he got out of jail, he swore he was never coming back to New York again. To the United States, went north, collected all of his works from everybody, stopping in DC, seeing Alain, Locke, give me back the paintings you didn't buy, all right? Went to New York, saw Langston Hughes, give me back those paintings, you didn't pay for those either, I'm taking them with me. Went to Scandinavia, married a Scandinavian Danish woman who was a weaver and a ceramicist, 17 years older than him. And then they traveled all the way through Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, having what we now call pop-up shows, hanging artwork on the soul. 1939, war hits. Europe is not the place to be. Comes back, settles in Harlem, and here he arrives in Harlem with an entirely different style. Because now he says, no, I am going to document the entire history of African Americans. My way, my style. His words, I am no ordinary Negro painter, period. Okay? Ben was real clear about that, all right? Now, the interesting thing about these are WPA workshop prints. These are silkscreen seriographs, all right? Here, this one, the jitterbugs, want you to look very carefully in the back. They ran out of paper. It did not stop him. He found newsprint and kept painting. He kept printing and printing and printing. That's folk family on the other side, which flies in the face of the stories about Black families being torn apart. Yeah, we were torn apart. We were torn out of Africa, put in the hole of a boat, brought over here, replaced on plantations, do you understand? Only second to reservations for indigenous Americans, and yet and still expected to create a life of our own. And then we were not full-class citizens ever, even in the aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation? No. So these artists are telling these stories which are encoded and have signified statements imbued in them if you understand the corollaries of the times in which they were created. Told you I can really talk on a lot of this stuff. I got stories because people said, why did you go and get a PhD? I said, because I'm nosy. I'm a colored girl, I'm nosy. And the only way I could get legitimacy and sanctification to do what I'm doing, I had to have a degree from a big white university, with a big title, because otherwise they're like, I was already too crazy for my time. So anyway, here we are with Charles Alston. And Charles Alston, yes, Charles Alston was the individual who taught Jacob Lawrence and was one of the first African Americans to go to Columbia Teachers College to get his degree, and became not only a singular artist in his own right, but a powerful imprint in the community. All right? So here, stud poker. But on the other side, he's talking about a deserted house. Wow. The range of topics and signifiers that happens within the changes of lifestyles in African Americans who come from the rural South, leaving the land, whether they owned it or not, whether they were sharecroppers, and the pastoral, the earth that they became very connected to have to live in urban centers. Jacob Lawrence is known for creating cities and blocks and buildings, to live in cubicles. This was very, very different and required, okay? Let me go back to this one thing. Here, the other thing that happened, and it really started in New Orleans, was jazz, all right? Rhythm and blues morphed into jazz. In Harlem and in many of the cities, Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, you used to have rent parties. You would have big bands going to ballrooms and places playing. But African Americans would create movement, sound. What do you call it, Henry? Sensionics? Mm-hmm. That's it. That's right. All parts of your body to read and experience an artistic statement. It is not just visual. So here, he's talking about, here they are dancing. Look at the angularity, all right? That Congo thing, all right? Bob Thompson used to talk about the Congo. And then you will see the musicians' instruments popping off, giving different kinds of sounds, which are really an echo of what they're hearing in the streets. What are they hearing in the streets? These people come from farmland. They came up on a train, new. We take it for granted. We came up on the Amtrak. Oh, it was slow, for us. For them, that was fast, all right? Then they saw cars, all right? And then they had bicycles in the street. And they had this cacophony of all of this energy going on in this densely packed place with people walking and talking and singing and moving all through the environment. So these artists are responding to this. These are the contrasts of what was going on in their life. I'm sorry I don't have names and titles on this. I have no tech skills, so, I got other skills, but not that, all right? So this is Charles Alston, teacher of Charles. Okay, now let's go to Cleveland, Ohio. Who ever thought Cleveland, Ohio would have such a powerful workshop? Okay, Karamu House, which means a joyful place for gathering. It's Swahili, there are other meetings, but for this particular site in Cleveland, Ohio, this worked the best. This is a place that was founded probably sometime around 1910, all right? So it was there before the WPA. It was an active center. Langston Hughes used to go here, have his plays and his musicals, and orchestras would come and perform at Karamu House. Huey Lee Smith wrote a book on him. Don't go to Amazon. They want $1,800 for the damn book. Only because it's out of print. However, go to Mary Ryan Gallery, and there is a new collection of Huey Lee Smith essays, and my book is ensconced in that book. But here are images that talk about, he calls this artist life number 1 and artist life number 2. Now, when the exhibition was installed at the Lehman Gallery of Art, I remember Huey Lee Smith walking along saying in shock, I never thought I'd ever see these works again. I'm just, all the artists, Ernie Critchlow was there, Roman Bearden, Jacob Lawrence came, even though he didn't have prints, but these are all the cohorts, the crew, the posse of artists who enforced and supported each other. This is Charles Soleil. And here, can you imagine a car, $100 used? You know that was back in the day. Way back in the day. And over here, just a gentle scene by invitation, someone asking to have a song played. So we talk about also the lifestyle. Now remember, this is in a period where James Van Der Zee, the photographer from Harlem, is taking a lot of photographs. These photographs are very important because they show a new kind of family life in an urban setting. And these photographs are sent home to individuals to let them know we're doing well. This move is different, but it is working for us. And this move, you have to also understand, was promoted by the Black press, the Black newspapers in most of these cities, who were talking about the rise of industrial developments that needed employment. They needed workers. They needed workers. The war was in, they were making war machines. Who the hell needs to know how to kill more people? I don't know, America, we do this, okay? So, William Smith. Jennifer, take notice. My son. Okay? Very rare to see a Black male father with his male son. All right? Over there, of course, payday. All right? A joy. These are linoleum cuts. All right, easy, quick to make. They were wonderful to work with. The materials were ready. They were small. They were just precious works. They could tell lots of stories. Because if you don't tell your own story, then the oppressor owns your reality. So you have to, and this goes for women too, it goes for all people. We have to take a different kind of agency on how we seek authenticity and validity and truth-telling. Now, this is Elmer Brown. Elmer Brown was a brilliant illustrator. He became the first African-American to be hired by American Greetings, was the second largest greeting card company next to Hallmark, 1950, all right? This is defense. He's making a statement here because he could not get a job working in the industries, in the war industries where he lived, all right? So he makes pictures about what it would be like to have been a member of that workforce. Over here, I love this one. This is woodcut. No, yeah, excuse me, a lino cut. Truth teller, a fortune teller, all right? Divination, all right? Little hoodoo in the house, all right? Little hoodoo, okay? When nothing else works, okay, let's figure this out, all right? There's always somebody in the community that can read something other than, all right? So we cannot knock all of the aspects that were carried from the South, that came from the convergence of all of these African communities. Let us also remember this. I was reading a book, sorry, I can't quote the title, but if you send me an email, I'll find it for you, where paleontologists and archaeologists were looking at the genealogy of Africans on the continent. And they said, you know, we really don't know where anybody came from because everybody was moving around. A lot of moving, a lot of migration on the continent, okay? Christianity was already there before they got here and became Baptists. So we have all of this, and then we have the French colonizing, we have the British colonizing, we have the Spanish colonizing, we have the Portuguese colonizing. Do you understand? We have all of this confusions of culture coming together, and then they're mixing it up. Vincent Winbush, a theologian, calls it scrambling. They scrambled it, shook it up, and made it come out in another form, which is a very clear part of the development of how modernism developed in the United States. Now, Atlanta. We didn't have a whole lot of artists in Atlanta, except for the fact that this is Wilmer Jennings. This is his, excuse me, his lino cut, and this is a woodcut. This is a statuette, and in this one, this has an African sculpture, which talks about African Americans finally beginning to have that engagement, as Alain Locke has been telling them. Look to your classical ancestry, look to your heritage. And so they're beginning to experiment with what those ideas are like, what that idea of a classical Western still life might look like with the presence of an African sensibility included. Over here on the other side, we're looking at what we call a back alley, all right? Because the cities and the places in which African Americans are sometimes left to live or dismissed to live or find themselves having no place else to go to live are already dilapidated and falling apart. So they're also telling us, you know, like while this urbanization is going on, there's something that's going on that is not supporting a quality of life conducive to us having moved from the South to the North to seek better options, education, economy in terms of jobs, the ability to shop. You know, we couldn't go into any department stores. You know, at best, we could order things from Montgomery Ward and Sears and Roebuck catalog. Hale Woodruff, the master, because Hale Woodruff stayed in Atlanta for a while before he traveled north to New York to become part of the faculty here at NYU for many years. And this is by parties unknown. Lynching, excuse me, has not left America. It's just morphed into a different other kind of way where police brutality gives permission to take undue license to extinguish the lives of Black people, all right? So this is Latin American people. And what they're doing to indigenous is they don't even want to talk about it, but this is still going on. Now, these are prints from 1939 to 1941. The other one is, you know, ladies, we like to just dress a little. So this is Sunday Promenade, which was the only day African Americans on most plantations, if they were free, okay, or if they were slaved, or if they were indentured, whatever that means, because white people that got enslaved were called indentured. So that's another whole story, right, Henry, that we'd have to deal with. But we dress up. We have pride in our sense of self and being. Philadelphia workshop. The Philadelphia workshop was probably had the most active arena of activities, the most energetic artists. This is Doc's Thrash. He was the granddaddy of a technique called carborundum, which is a kind of litho, deeply using that greasy stuff that they put in the gears and machines and wheels and things in order to make it go smooth, all right? Well, they started experimenting with it and kind of layering it and plastering it down and found that it could yield so many more fine elements of tonality in rendering black and white and gray. And this is called ship fitters. My father was a ship fitter in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I knew about this. I said, oh yeah, I know this. My father would take the family every spring for a show and tell. And we would see the aircraft carriers and the submarines and the battleships that he built. And then sometimes he would come home and he would be all burnt up. I said, what happened to you, Dad? He said, oh, the rivet was coming because he worked in a swing. He would be working in a swing and he would be pulling all of the elements of the ship together. And sometimes he missed the rivet and the hot rivet would. So my mother was a nurse. She knew what to do. you know. But the other one here is called Saturday Night. And this one has a funny story too, because in 2015, I was working in Baltimore with a senior fellowship from the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation, helping them to buy properties. They bought the properties, but I helped them transform the properties into artist hubs and maker labs. So one day, a journalist from Sunday morning on the news, Sunday morning, is walking through the Philadelphia Museum of Art and sees this print. And she says, "Oh my, that's Saturday night. I have to do a story for Sunday morning." And so they always would have every now and then an art story. So long story short, here I get another one of these oblique calls. Would you mind talking about Saturday Night by Doc Thrash? And I went, okay, why? You know, what's the point? Okay, where is this going? Anyway, they come to Baltimore, the entire film crew, the whole thing. Of course, the foundation was ecstatic. I'm still wondering what the hell is going on. So we actually talked about these prints in their time and what they meant. And then as we finished off, the woman said, "Well, is she going out for Saturday night?" And I said, "Well, maybe she's going to have to show up Sunday morning for church and deal with what happens Saturday night," which is a reality, because how do you deal with the stress of living in a nation like this? What do you do to level the trauma that is going on 24/7? All right. Who do you talk to? Where do you get relief? All right. Well, we in the culture, we have to find ways to make our own relief, to find our centers of support and liberation. This is the work of Claude Clark. Three men. Three men. This is like the war. All right. Now, a lot of these soldiers went over, came back, and still could get no respect. But they came back with the traumas of war. And they came back with those stories, and they shared those stories. And there are many, many of these soldiers who went into art and began to record that. My own brother, who knew, at the age of 65, all of a sudden starts painting. He was a musician all his life. I said, "What is up with this?" He said, "I just had these visions of Vietnam." And he starts painting these incredible, gorgeous, right, Larry? Paintings of what he remembers, the positive part of what he remembered from Vietnam. We just don't know. We don't have a way. Did it ever occur to us how many of those homeless people that we see on the street are really veterans who come from all of these wars? Where was their WPA money? Where was their support? What is the Veterans Administration doing there? Because many of those individuals are people who served our country. So images like this tell us of the gravity of the experiences, the repetition of weight that is carried by each human being. Samuel Brown. Now this one over here called Wash Girl, I think it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek on a lot of the grotesque imagery of images that were done with the Gold Dust Twins. If any of you all know, if you don't, go home and Google the Gold Dust Twins, okay? They were two little black boys, okay, who were usually put in white or with a white child, indicating that if you washed up real good, your black could become white, all right? And so black images, black grotesque images within, and these were on, I mean, old black Joes on cans of food. Excuse me, they just took Aunt Jemima off the pancake box of late. You understand? This was the way that they sold products, and as well as reinforcing the subhumanity of what people of color are all about. Okay? Now, this is the one that really pissed me off when I did the exhibition at the Lehman Gallery of Art. This is Raymond Steff from the Philadelphia Graphics Workshop. And this piece is called Heaven on a Mule. And when I sent my checklist in, you know, I'm really on faculty at MICA, so I'm teaching and I'm teaching art history. So I'm also, you know, freelancing my curatorial skills. But I figure as a curator, I have, you know, some rights. And so when I called up to the gallery to find out, you know, that they had secured all the loans, the director of the gallery tells me, no, this painting, this print is not there. I said, what do you mean it's not there? Well, I didn't exactly think it was very relevant. And I said, well, how do you determine relevancy in terms of the stories that Black printmakers are telling about the lives and the experiences they have? All right, here we have a landfill. Or did you notice all the discards on the landfill? All right, here we have children on the back of a mule. Here we have a father praying to an apparition. Here we have a mother down on the ground with her head, knowing the desperation of how to make a life for her family. All of these people have wings on their back. What happened to those 40 acres on a mule? All right? This woman did not want this image to be seen. It's all right. I called up the Philadelphia Museum, not the museum, it was the Logan Square Library. And I had called them months before because when the WPA terminated, as is everything with the government, they just pulled the plug, as we are witnessing now. They pull the plug, they tell you to pack up everything, and they give you a site to send all of those objects to. So I had called this librarian, I said, the records indicate that you received X number of cartons of archival materials from this workshop in Philadelphia. No, we don't have it. I said, the records indicate that you have, no, we don't have it. I said, okay, tell you what, I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm gonna leave you my phone number, and this is before Google, so I'm doing everything card catalog. For those of you who know, I'm in card catalog on my knees, all right? Didn't they call me back 3 weeks later? Oh my God, we found. I went, duh, yeah, I told you it was there. So I called this library and I told them, see this print? This print, I gave them the name and everything. And it was a nasty day. I said, pack that print up, wrap it so that nothing, no moisture will get to it. I am going to courier it. I'm coming from Baltimore. I'm going to get off in Philadelphia, go to the museum, go to the library, pick up the print and take it to New York. Took it all the way to New York, gave it to the director, and she was so livid at me. If she could have lynched me at that moment, and I said, bring it, because you're going to put this in the show too. All right? Because stories like these are so powerful. And all of his work talks about different aspects of the workforce that was going on within the Philadelphia region. Now, what happened? And I'm not going to keep you much longer, so I'm going to, because I don't know how long we'll be on live stream. Anyway, the transitional aftermath of the WPA, boom, 1943, it's over. But that doesn't mean printmaking stops. Elizabeth Catlett in Mexico, all right, 1946, marries Pancho Mora, all right, after her marriage to Charles White, which we're not allowed to talk to because she's smacking me and has smacked me in public for even bringing up the name, okay? So we don't want to go there. Anyway, she goes to Mexico, largely because the United States has forbidden her to come back to the United States, okay? So she's an expat in Mexico, becomes head of the sculpture department at the University of Mexico, all right? Marries Pancho Mora, who is head of the Telegrafica, radical printmakers in Mexico, and to which many African Americans came, including John Wilson, John Wilson, whose exhibition will open at the MFA Boston, February 9th, that we just worked on. And they became fast friends, so that Elizabeth Catlett became the godmother of his eldest child. So these two people in the late 40s, 50s are carrying on the tradition, talking about all of the questions. I tend to think that that might be a little bit of a self-portrait of John Wilson, okay? Talking about what it's like to be in Boston, New England. And we're doing this because here's a New England artist who has been completely kind of slid off the grid of recognition. And so we're trying to correct the annals of art history, Jennifer Farrell and I, and my crew, my Wilson team. Okay, Edward Sorrell and Patrick Murphy in Boston. That's my crew. This is my New York crew. That's my Boston crew. And me and B More. Okay, so now, calling out. Oh, sorry. Calling out America with Black Joy. Norma Morgan, another one, barely ever spoken of. And you'll notice that women in the era of the WPA got very little attention. Maybe as much as perhaps 15% of the women got jobs during the WPA. So now, and let me also say this, let me give you another footnote. In the aftermath of slavery, when artists of color began to move into the terrain of working in the arts, the men more went into painting, drawing, and printmaking, and the women became sculptors. Very fascinating. We did a show called 3 Generations of African American women sculptors, which looked at the role of, from Edmonia Lewis to Barbara Chase Rabeau. All right. The Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, is getting ready to mount in 2026 a massive exhibition on Edmonia Lewis. All right. So here we have these dichotomies of these women who have been tenacious in their artwork. These are large prints. All of a sudden, these women, they're not doing these little tiny little sweet things, because most of the things that I just showed you are like, a linoleum thing is like 12 by 12. And a lot of the etchings are like barely 7 by 9. All right. So, and this is like the landscape. She is into the aspects of nature as a forming part of our reality at a time when nobody's paying attention to nature. Or the ideas is 1965. Well, the ideas about nature are not resonant with the popular ideas of what's going on in pop art and the Black arts movement. Nelson Stevens, Afro-Cobra, Kool-Aid colors. All of a sudden, things start popping, serigraphs. Dana Chandler, Together Brothers. These prints, this system of printmaking became extremely popular and easy for them to create original works of art so people in their community could afford to buy them. I remember these prints sometimes selling $5 to $25. I bought this print $400. My son went and found it in my portfolio. He said, "Mom, do you know how much this thing costs?" Because he looked it up. Do you understand? All of a sudden now, we are beginning to understand the empowerment of it. This print, Nelson Stevens took to Festec, 1977. Gave it to Fela, the Nigerian political activist. And he looked at it and said, "Yeah, that's cool." And Nelson spent 3 days with Fela, and I didn't want to know anything about it. I'm not going there. Margot Humphrey, 1988. This is The Last Barbecue. The Last Barbecue. All right? Look at the colors. Look at the folks. A blue Jesus. Okay? Talk about signification, making fun. This is Henry Louis Gates talking about the encoded language that African Americans bring to the works that they're doing. You know, there's all kinds of ways to make resistance. And this brings incredible joy to us because we just look at it, we just laugh. We just know what this is about. Wonder what was on that table they were eating, okay? What kind of ribs, what kind of greens, you know? See over here, some chicken over here, all right? And then you overlay it with the Christianity that was used to condone the, as Martin Luther King said, the bad business of Americans' erroneous behaviors, all right? By using religion to condone things. We look at what's happening with the Catholic Church now. We just have to say, wait a minute, we have a lot of things that have gone offline. Joseph Norman, one of the only artists to have a solo show on Wilson, and this is called Slum Landscape. Grew up in Chicago. You know, when you live in urban neighborhoods that are falling apart, always next door, around the corner, there's a lot full of junk where people just cast off. So he tends to go into these places and looks at them and makes these humongous prints. These things are like 6 feet, all right? Huge prints that talk about the nature of our cities, where we are not taking care of the communities who have been left to live in those arenas. When I moved to Baltimore, I did not realize its history. Baltimore became the center of understanding how to redline communities, all right? If you read Isabel Wilkerson's Caste, she talks all about that. And that people all over the world, Mahatma Gandhi, all right? All of Hitler's henchmen came over to understand how to suppress individuals and keep them locked into environments where they cannot excel, where they cannot become privileged to intergenerational wealth. This is Michael Platt out of Washington, D.C. Michael Platt on the way back home, looking at the female body and what is happening. He did a lot of work. Unfortunately, Michael passed before he had a chance to finish messaging the vision of what he was talking about. His wife is a poet. They work collaboratively often, but he often talked about the trafficking that is still to this day that is going on with women globally, everywhere. Delita Martin, Houston, Texas, all right? Delita does these silkscreen prints, and she cuts them up. Then she patchworks and stitches them back together. So we're looking at the iteration of how the experimentation, the innovation, the improvisation is taking over. And then finally, I end with this. LaToya Hobbs in Baltimore City. This is 144 inches by 98, all right? A Black mother being born. So with that, I thank you so much. I hope I didn't overstay my welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leslie King Hammond. That was amazing. Thank you. We have time for a couple of questions. Don't make me ask the first one, because I got a lot.
That's right, there are no grades.
Y'all ain't got no questions.
That's all right, they're in shock. Thank you all so much. Really, you don't have to ask questions. You can mob me later. Thank you for being here.
No questions?
Let's go drink. See?
Spoken. Okay, please give one more warm round of applause for Dr. Leslie King Hammond. Please also give it up for the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, keeping Robert Blackburn's legacy alive. Sign up, take a workshop. Maybe you can make a giant print like this. I don't know. I know you all have questions. Please feel free to come up and ask them directly. Thank you all so much for joining us. Lester Beall and A New American Identity is on view at Poster House through February 23rd downstairs. If you haven't seen it yet, please go check it out. Thank you again.